The Galactic Federation was abuzz with excitement over the newly launched cultural exchange program. For the first time in recorded history, humans and aliens would live together, learn from each other, and hopefully build lasting bonds. Among the volunteers was a human named Jason Walker, a skilled mechanic from a small town on Earth. He wasn't particularly thrilled about the idea of sharing his home with an alien, but curiosity, and the generous stipend, had won him over. Ketra, the alien assigned to Jason, came from the Cytherian race. Her species was known for their advanced technology and logical minds, but had a reputation for being extremely reserved. Their society valued efficiency and intellect above all else, leaving little room for emotions or social connections. Ketra herself was a scientist, chosen for her ability to adapt and analyze new environments. When she first arrived on Earth, Ketra was struck by how chaotic everything seemed. The bright colors of Earth's landscapes, the noisy streets, and the casual way humans interacted were overwhelming. She stepped out of the sleek galactic transport vessel, her silver suit glinting under the sun, and found Jason waiting for her. Jason was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s. His brown hair was messy from the wind, and his jeans and work boots were stained with oil. "Welcome to Earth," he said with a grin that seemed friendly enough, though a bit awkward. "Thank you," Ketra replied, her voice calm and steady. She tilted her head, studying him. Human expressions were fascinatingly different from those of her species. The ride back to Jason's house was filled with silence, punctuated only by Jason's occasional explanations about human customs. Ketra's large violet eyes scanned everything around her, taking in the lush greenery, the distant mountains, and the odd assortment of human vehicles on the road. "This is where you'll be staying," Jason said as he parked the truck in front of his small but cozy house. The place was modest, with a garden out front and a large garage where Jason worked on repairing old vehicles and machinery. Ketra stepped out and observed her surroundings. "It is different from Zithar. There is much color here." Jason chuckled. "Yeah, Earth's got a lot of that. Hope you like it." Inside the house, Jason showed her to the guest room, which he cleaned up for her arrival. Ketra's antennae twitched slightly as she inspected the space. She placed her metallic suitcase on the bed and began unpacking her devices, which looked more advanced than anything Jason had ever seen. "So, what do you think of Earth so far?" Jason asked, leaning against the doorframe. "It is vibrant," Ketra replied after a moment. "Your people appear to enjoy many unnecessary things." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Unnecessary? Like what?" She gestured to a framed picture on the wall. "This. It serves no practical purpose." Jason smirked. "That's called art. It doesn't have to be practical. It's about making you feel something." Ketra looked at the picture again, her expression thoughtful. "Interesting. My people do not create such things. Our focus is on functionality." "Well, maybe you'll learn a thing or two while you're here," Jason said with a grin. Over the next few days, Ketra began adjusting to life on Earth. Jason introduced her to the local town, where she met other humans. They were friendly but often stared at her strange appearance. Ketra's pale, almost translucent skin and shimmering silver hair made her stand out, even among the most eccentric Earthlings. At home, she spent hours observing Jason as he worked in his garage. She was fascinated by the way he used simple tools to solve complex problems, often improvising with whatever materials he had on hand. It was so unlike the Zitharian way of doing things, which relied on precision and pre-planned systems. One evening, as Jason wiped his hands clean of grease, Ketra asked, "Why do humans work so hard with limited tools? Your methods are inefficient." Jason shrugged. "Because we make do with what we have. It's not always about having the best tools. It's about figuring things out. That's how we've survived for so long." Ketra nodded slowly, filing away his words. There was something intriguing about humans, something she couldn't quite define. Despite their apparent flaws, They had an adaptability and determination that fascinated her. As the days went by, Ketra's curiosity about humans only grew. But there was one question that lingered in her mind, one she hadn't yet dared to ask. What was it about human biology that made them so different? She would find out soon enough, but the answer would shock her more than she could ever imagine. Ketra's first week on Earth was a whirlwind of new experiences and unexpected challenges. Living with Jason proved more complicated than she had anticipated. Humans, she quickly realized, had a way of filling every space with their presence. Jason wasn't intentionally intrusive, but his casual demeanor and lack of concern for personal boundaries left Ketra constantly on edge. On the first morning, Ketra woke up to the smell of something burning. She followed the strange odor to the kitchen, where Jason was flipping pancakes with a relaxed expression. The air was filled with smoke, and the pancakes looked oddly misshapen. "What is this?" Ketra asked, her antennae twitching with curiosity and mild alarm. "Breakfast," Jason said, grinning as he set a plate of charred pancakes on the table. Ketra leaned closer, inspecting the food. "It appears inedible." Jason laughed. "It's not perfect, but it'll do. Humans eat for more than just survival, you know. It's about taste and enjoyment." Reluctantly, Ketra took a small bite. The flavor was strange but not unpleasant. She decided to study human food more closely, filing the experience away as part of her growing database on Earth customs. As the days passed, Ketra found herself constantly adapting to Jason's way of life. Humans, she discovered, were noisy creatures. Jason had a habit of playing loud music in the garage while he worked, something that baffled Ketra. She watched from a corner as he tinkered with an old car engine, nodding his head to the rhythm of the music. "Does this noise serve a purpose?" she asked, her voice cutting through the steady beat of drums and guitars. Jason looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's music. It helps me focus, keeps me motivated." Ketra frowned. "Your focus is divided. Would silence not be more efficient?" Jason smirked. "Maybe for you, but humans are wired differently. Sometimes a little chaos helps us think clearer." Ketra didn't entirely understand, but she made a mental note to study the psychological effects of music on humans. The most difficult part of living together, however, was adjusting to shared spaces. Zitharians valued privacy above all else, and Ketra was unaccustomed to the casual way Jason moved through the house. On several occasions, she found him walking around barefoot or with his shirt untucked, a level of informality that made her uneasy. One afternoon, Ketra was in the living room, studying human anatomy on Jason's old tablet. She was deeply engrossed in a diagram when Jason walked in, carrying a box of tools. He flopped onto the couch next to her, startling her out of her concentration. "Working hard, huh?" he said, glancing at the screen. Ketra quickly turned off the tablet. "Yes, I am studying your species." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Anatomy, huh? Anything interesting?" Ketra hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Your biology is complex. There are features that seem unnecessary for survival." Jason chuckled. "Yeah, humans are full of surprises." Their conversations often took strange turns like this, leaving Ketra with more questions than answers. Despite her frustration, she found herself intrigued by Jason's perspective on life. One evening, after a long day in the garage, Jason suggested they watch a movie. Ketra was initially reluctant but agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to learn more about human culture. Jason selected a classic action film, complete with explosions, car chases, and a dramatic soundtrack. Ketra watched in silence, her antennae twitching occasionally as she tried to process the fast-paced visuals and emotional storytelling. "This is fiction?" she asked during a particularly intense scene. "Yep," Jason replied. "Just for entertainment." "Pretty cool, huh?" "It is. Loud," Ketra said, though she couldn't deny that the story had a certain appeal. By the end of the movie, Ketra was left pondering the human need for such vivid expressions of emotion and conflict. Zitharians valued logic and order, yet humans seemed to thrive on chaos and unpredictability. As she prepared to retire to her room that night, Ketra couldn't help but reflect on how different life on Earth was from her home planet. Humans were messy, unpredictable, and often inefficient, but they possessed a resilience and creativity that intrigued her. Jason, for all his casual behavior, embodied these traits. He was resourceful, quick to adapt, and endlessly curious. Though their worlds were vastly different, Ketra began to wonder if there was more to learn from humans than she had initially thought. Little did she know, her curiosity about human biology and culture would soon lead to a discovery that would shake her understanding of not just humans, but herself as well. Ketra's days on Earth were filled with surprises, but her fascination with humans and their biology was becoming harder to ignore. The more time she spent with Jason, the more questions she had. Humans were a curious mix of strength, creativity, and emotion, and their physical structure seemed to reflect this balance in ways Ketra could not fully understand. One morning, while Jason worked in the garage, Ketra decided to explore his workshop. It was a cluttered space filled with tools, machines, and half-assembled projects. Each object seemed to have a purpose, though its exact use escaped her. She picked up a wrench, turning it over in her hands. "You ever use one of those before?" Jason's voice broke her concentration. Ketra turned to see him wiping grease from his hands, a smirk on his face. "No," she admitted. "Your tools are primitive, yet effective. It is fascinating how you compensate for the lack of advanced technology." Jason chuckled. "We make do. Sometimes simpler is better." Ketra frowned, her analytical mind processing his words. "Your methods seem inefficient. Why not create tools that perform tasks autonomously?" Jason shrugged. "Because there's value in doing things yourself. It's not just about getting the job done. It's about learning, improving, and sometimes just enjoying the process." Ketra tilted her head, filing away his response. Humans, she realized, valued effort and creativity as much as the outcome itself. Later that day, as they shared a meal, Ketra couldn't resist asking another question. Why do humans place so much importance on physical differences? Jason paused mid-bite, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ketra gestured vaguely toward him. "Your gender, for instance. Your anatomy differs significantly from females of your species. In my race, such distinctions are minimal." Jason coughed, clearly caught off guard. "Well, humans are complicated. Gender plays a big role in biology, culture, and other stuff." Ketra's violet eyes narrowed as she leaned forward. "Elaborate. Why are these differences necessary?" Jason scratched the back of his head, clearly uncomfortable. "It's evolutionary. Different roles, survival, reproduction. You know, the basics." Ketra nodded, though she wasn't entirely satisfied with his vague explanation. She decided to conduct her own research later. That evening, Jason suggested they visit the local town. Ketra hesitated but eventually agreed, curious to see more of human society. The town was bustling with activity, bright lights, loud conversations, and a variety of humans interacting in ways Ketra found both chaotic and intriguing. Jason led her to a small cafe, where they sat outside, observing the lively street. As they waited for their drinks, a group of teenagers walked by, laughing and joking loudly. "They appear to lack discipline," Ketra observed, her antennae twitching. Jason laughed. "They're just having fun. Humans need that sometimes, letting loose, being silly. It's part of what keeps us going." Ketra frowned, trying to process this new aspect of human behavior. Her race valued order and efficiency, leaving little room for frivolity. Yet, humans seemed to thrive on it. As they walked back to Jason's house, Ketra couldn't help but ask more questions. "Your species is unique. Your physicality, your emotions, your unpredictability. It is both inefficient and remarkable." Jason grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. But you haven't seen half of what humans can do yet. That night, as Jason prepared for bed, Ketra stayed up, scrolling through human biology databases on the tablet Jason had given her. The more she learned, the more questions she had. Human anatomy was far more complex than she had anticipated, with unique features that seemed almost designed to baffle her logical mind. One diagram in particular caught her attention, and her antennae twitched as she studied it closely. She couldn't understand why humans had developed such physical differences between genders. From an evolutionary standpoint, it seemed unnecessary, yet it clearly played a significant role in their society and reproduction. Ketra's curiosity grew to the point where she found herself unable to sleep. She decided to ask Jason more questions the next day, no matter how awkward they might be. Little did she know, her growing curiosity would soon lead to an encounter that would challenge her understanding of not just humans, but herself as well. The boundaries of her Zitharian logic were about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The morning was quiet, the sunlight filtering through the kitchen window as Jason made coffee. Ketra sat at the table, her antennae twitching slightly as she reviewed her notes on human biology. Her questions about human anatomy had only multiplied, and she had decided that today was the day to get answers, no matter how awkward the conversation might be. "Jason," she began, her tone as direct as ever, "I need to discuss something important with you." Jason raised an eyebrow, sipping his coffee. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Ketra hesitated for a moment, then dove straight in. "Why do humans have such pronounced physical differences between genders? It seems inefficient." Jason nearly choked on his coffee. "Wow, that's not exactly breakfast table talk, Ketra. I do not understand your hesitation," she said, tilting her head. "It is a scientific inquiry. Your gender-specific traits appear unnecessary for survival, yet your species emphasizes them heavily." Jason scratched the back of his head, clearly uncomfortable. "It's complicated. A lot of it has to do with evolution, culture, and, well, reproduction." Ketra's violet eyes narrowed as she processed his words. "Reproduction. Yes, I have read about this. But why such complexity? My species reproduces efficiently without such physical distinctions." Jason set his coffee mug down, sighing. "Humans are just built differently, I guess. It's part of what makes us, well, human." Ketra nodded, though she still didn't feel satisfied with his explanation. She decided to let the matter rest for the moment, but her curiosity continued to simmer beneath the surface. Later that day, Jason was busy repairing an old motorcycle in his garage. The air was filled with the scent of oil and metal, and the sound of tools clinking echoed in the space. Ketra watched from a corner, her keen eyes studying his every move. Jason's shirt was soaked with sweat as he leaned over the engine, his muscles flexing with the effort. Ketra couldn't help but notice how different his physicality was compared to Zitharians. Humans were undeniably strong and resilient, their bodies adapted to a wide range of environments and tasks. Her curiosity reached a tipping point when Jason stood up, stretching his arms above his head. His movements were so natural, so unguarded, that Ketra felt compelled to ask the question that had been nagging at her all day. "Jason," she said, her tone unusually hesitant. He turned to her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yeah, I have observed significant differences in your anatomy, but I have not yet fully understood them. May I ask to see?" Jason froze, the rag falling from his hands. "See? What exactly are you asking to see, Ketra?" She gestured vaguely. "Your physical differences. It is purely scientific. I need to understand." Jason's face turned bright red, and he laughed nervously. "Yeah, that's not gonna happen, Ketra. Humans have something called privacy, and this definitely falls under that category." Ketra tilted her head, confused. "Why is this private? It is a natural part of your biology." "Because it's personal," Jason said, trying to find the right words. "Humans don't just show those parts to anyone. It's considered Inappropriate. Ketra's antennae twitched in frustration. Your customs are illogical. How can I learn if you withhold information? Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I get that this is all new to you, but there are some things humans just don't share casually. You'll have to take my word for it. Despite Jason's refusal, Ketra's curiosity only deepened. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the mystery of human anatomy. Her scientific mind demanded answers, but she also couldn't ignore the strange new emotions she was feeling. For the first time, Ketra found herself questioning not just humans, but her own species as well. What if the differences she saw weren't inefficiencies, but strengths? What if there was something to be learned from the very traits she had dismissed as unnecessary? As the moonlight streamed through the window, Ketra made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth about humans, even if it meant challenging everything she thought she knew about biology, culture, and herself. Little did she know, her journey of discovery was only just beginning, and the answers she sought would lead to revelations far beyond her original question. The morning sunlight streamed into the kitchen as Jason cooked breakfast. He was humming to himself, flipping pancakes, when Ketra walked in, her antennae twitching slightly as she observed him. Over the past few weeks, Jason had gotten used to her silent presence, though it was still a little unnerving at times. "Good morning," Jason said, glancing over his shoulder. "Good morning," Ketra replied, her voice steady. She sat at the table, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "Jason, I have been thinking." Jason sighed, already sensing where this was going. "About what?" "About human biology," Ketra said, leaning forward slightly. "Specifically, the differences between males and females of your species. I still do not fully understand their purpose." Jason froze mid-flip, the pancake nearly sliding off the pan. "Ketra, we've talked about this." "Yes," she said, nodding. "But your answers have been vague and unsatisfactory. I require more detail." Jason set the pan down, turning to face her with an exasperated look. "It's not that simple. Humans have a lot of history and culture tied to gender. It's not just about biology. It's about how we've evolved and adapted over time." Ketra tilted her head, her violet eyes narrowing. "Explain." Jason rubbed the back of his neck, trying to find the right words. "Okay, look. Human males and females develop differences because of evolution. Physical traits like strength, size, or other things helped us survive in different ways. Over time, those differences became part of our identity." Ketra considered this, her expression thoughtful. "So these differences are functional and cultural." "Exactly," Jason said, relieved that she seemed to be following. "And yeah, some of it might seem unnecessary now, but it's a part of who we are." Ketra nodded slowly. "I see. It is an integration of biology and culture. Fascinating." Jason smiled, turning back to his cooking. "Glad we cleared that up." But Ketra wasn't done. "One more question." Jason groaned. "Of course. What is it? Why are humans so sensitive about these differences?" Jason nearly dropped the spatula. He took a deep breath, setting the pancakes on a plate before sitting across from her at the table. "Because those parts of us are private. It's personal, and it's tied to how we connect with others on a deeper level. It's not something we just share openly." Ketra frowned, clearly puzzled. "Zetharians do not have such restrictions. Our bodies are functional, and there is no shame in discussing them." "Well, humans are different," Jason said with a shrug. "Privacy is a big deal for us. It's about respect and boundaries." Ketra was silent for a moment, processing his words. "Perhaps this is why your species is so emotionally complex. Your privacy creates a layer of individuality that my species does not prioritize." Jason nodded. "Maybe. It's just how we've always been." The conversation ended there, but Ketra's curiosity lingered. That day, as Jason worked in the garage, she found herself watching him more closely than usual. She noticed how his movements were efficient yet fluid, how his body seemed to embody both strength and adaptability. "Jason," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. He looked up from the engine he was fixing. "Yeah, you said earlier that human differences are tied to connection. Does this mean your biology influences your emotions?" Jason wiped his hands on a rag, considering her question. "In a way, yeah. Humans are emotional creatures. Our biology and emotions are pretty connected, whether we like it or not." Ketra nodded, filing away his response. "That explains much of your behavior. Your emotions drive your actions, even when they are inefficient." Jason smirked. "Inefficient or not, it's what makes us human." Ketra couldn't argue with that. Despite her logical mind, she found herself drawn to the unpredictable nature of humans. Their ability to balance strength and emotion, logic and creativity, was unlike anything she had encountered before. That evening, as they sat outside watching the stars, Ketra spoke again. "Jason, I believe I am beginning to understand your species better. Your differences are not inefficiencies. They are adaptations that make you unique." Jason glanced at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Thanks, Ketra. I think you're starting to get it." Ketra looked up at the stars, her antennae twitching slightly. "There is much more to learn, but I am beginning to see the value in what I once considered illogical. Your kind is remarkable." Jason smiled, leaning back in his chair. "And you're not so bad yourself, Ketra." For the first time, Ketra felt a sense of connection she had never experienced before. The lines between logic and emotion, human and alien, were beginning to blur. And she couldn't wait to see where this journey would take her next. The days were growing cooler as autumn settled on Earth, painting the trees with vibrant hues of red, orange, and gold. For Ketra, the changing seasons were yet another fascinating aspect of human life. On her home planet, environmental conditions were controlled and unchanging. Earth, in contrast, was a symphony of constant evolution, and Ketra found herself increasingly drawn to its unpredictability. Jason had planned a trip to the nearby mountains to show Ketra the full beauty of Earth's nature. "You've seen the town, the garage, and the house," he said with a grin. "But if you really want to understand humans, you need to see where we come from, the wild." Ketra agreed, though she wasn't entirely sure what Jason meant. The concept of wild was foreign to her structured mind. Her people had long since tamed their planet, eliminating anything that didn't serve a clear purpose. The drive to the mountains was quiet, save for the hum of Jason's truck and the occasional chirp of birds outside. Ketra spent most of the ride observing the landscape, her violet eyes wide with curiosity. The dense forests, sprawling fields, and distant peaks were unlike anything she had seen before. When they arrived, Jason led her along a winding trail, pointing out various plants and animals. "This," he said, gesturing to a tall oak tree, "is a big part of why humans are the way we are. We grew up in places like this, surviving, adapting, and figuring things out as we went." Ketra placed a hand on the rough bark of the tree, her antennae twitching. "Your species evolved in an environment that required constant adaptation. This explains much of your resilience." "Exactly," Jason said, smiling. "We had to learn to work together, build tools, and think on our feet. Nature taught us how to survive." As they continued their hike, Ketra noticed how Jason seemed at ease in this environment. He moved confidently, his footsteps steady even on uneven terrain. Ketra, on the other hand, found herself struggling to keep up, her thin frame not built for such physical exertion. "Are you all right?" Jason asked, pausing to offer her a hand. "I am unaccustomed to this level of activity," Ketra admitted, taking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and she felt a small jolt of curiosity at the warmth of his touch. "You're doing great," Jason said, pulling her up a steep incline. "Just take it one step at a time." They reached a clearing with a breathtaking view of the valley below. Ketra stood in awe, her antennae twitching as she took in the scene. The vibrant colors of the trees, the winding river, and the distant mountains were like nothing she had ever seen. "This is beautiful," she said softly. Jason nodded. Yeah, it's places like this that remind us what we're fighting for. Humans don't always get it right, but we try to protect what matters. Ketra sat on a nearby rock, her mind racing with thoughts. Your species is remarkable, Jason. You adapt to challenges, find beauty in chaos, and draw strength from your emotions. I see now that what I once considered inefficiencies are, in fact, your greatest strengths. Jason sat beside her, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, Ketra, you're not so different from us. Your people might be more logical, but you've got your own kind of strength. You're curious, determined, and willing to learn. That's pretty human, if you ask me. Ketra looked at him, her violet eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. Perhaps there is more we share than I first believed. The sun began to set, casting the valley in shades of gold and pink. Jason started a small campfire, showing Ketra how to roast marshmallows. She found the activity strange, but oddly enjoyable. As they sat by the fire, Jason shared stories of human history, of great struggles and triumphs, of people who overcame impossible odds. Ketra listened intently, her respect for humanity growing with each tale. You see, Jason said, staring into the flames, humans aren't perfect. We make mistakes, but we learn. That's what makes us who we are. Ketra nodded, her antennae dipping slightly in agreement. You are a species of resilience and creativity. There is much I can learn from you. As the stars appeared in the sky, Ketra felt a strange warmth in her chest, a sense of connection she had never experienced before. Humans, she realized, were not just fascinating, they were inspiring. And for the first time, she felt grateful to be a part of their world, even if only for a short while. Her journey of discovery was far from over, but she knew one thing for certain. Humans had changed her, and she would never see the universe the same way again. The final weeks of Ketra's stay on Earth were approaching, and the weight of her impending departure began to settle over both her and Jason. Though neither said it aloud, the time they had spent together had changed them both. For Ketra, her logical view of the universe had been shaken by the raw, messy beauty of humanity. For Jason, having an alien housemate had opened his eyes to the value of understanding other perspectives. One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the valley, Jason found Ketra sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. Her antennae twitched slightly, a sign he had come to recognize as deep thought. Morning, Jason said, stepping outside with a mug of coffee. You're up early. Ketra nodded but didn't turn to face him. I was reflecting. My time here has been transformative. Jason leaned against the railing, sipping his coffee. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I'll admit, I didn't think we'd get along at first, but now, I can't imagine the house without you in it. Ketra turned to him, her violet eyes shimmering in the morning light. Your species is unlike any I have encountered. At first, I saw your differences as inefficiencies, but now I see them as your greatest strengths. Your adaptability, your emotions, your creativity. They are what make you extraordinary. Jason chuckled. Coming from you, that means a lot. But you know, you've taught me a thing or two, too. You've got this way of breaking things down, seeing them for what they really are. It's made me think about stuff I've never questioned before. Ketra tilted her head. Such as? Jason shrugged. Like why we do things the way we do. You've made me realize that some of our traditions might not make much sense, but they're part of what make us human. They sat in silence for a moment, the quiet broken only by the distant sound of birds. Later that day, Jason suggested they go on one last adventure. I've got something special in mind, he said, a mischievous grin on his face. Ketra agreed, intrigued by his sudden enthusiasm. They loaded up the truck and drove to a nearby canyon, where Jason revealed a pair of climbing ropes and harnesses. We're going rock climbing, he announced. Ketra stared at him, her antennae twitching in disbelief. You intend to ascend a vertical surface using primitive tools. This seems highly inefficient. Jason laughed. Maybe, but it's also exhilarating. Trust me, you'll love it. Despite her reservations, Ketra allowed Jason to strap her into a harness and guide her up the rock face. The climb was challenging, her thin frame not built for such physical exertion. But as she reached the top, pulling herself over the edge with Jason's help, she felt a surge of pride. The view from the summit was breathtaking. The canyon stretched out below them, the river glinting in the sunlight. Ketra sat beside Jason, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. That, Jason said, grinning, is what humans call an adventure. Ketra looked at him, her expression uncharacteristically soft. I understand now why your species seeks such experiences. They remind you of your strength and your connection to the world around you. Exactly, Jason said. It's not just about getting to the top. It's about the journey. As they descended and drove back home, Ketra felt a growing sense of gratitude. Jason's words echoed in her mind, and she realized that her time on Earth had been more than just a learning experience. It had been a journey of growth, both for her and for Jason. That evening, as they sat around a small fire in the backyard, Ketra finally spoke the words she had been holding back. Jason, I will miss this place. And I will miss you. Jason smiled, his voice quiet. I'll miss you too, Ketra. You've been more than just a guest. You've been a friend. They sat in silence, watching the flames flicker. Ketra's antennae dipped slightly, a gesture Jason had come to recognize as a sign of emotion. Do you think I will be welcomed back here someday? Ketra asked softly. Jason looked at her, his expression warm. Anytime. You'll always have a place here, Ketra. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Ketra felt a strange but comforting sense of belonging. Earth had shown her a new way of seeing the universe, and Jason had shown her the meaning of true connection. She wasn't just returning to Zithar with new knowledge. She was returning with a new perspective, one that would shape her forever. And in her heart, she knew that no matter how far she traveled, a part of her would always belong to Earth.